In this video, I want to take a look at another game that I played last weekend, and by now my opponent had kind of figured out that I like to play gambits. Not necessarily sound gambits, but also questionable gambits as well. And here I was surprised that my opponent took the pawn, but after knight c6, I was a little disappointed that he played g3 instead of trying to hold on to the pawn with knight f3 or bishop f4. So I just recaptured the pawn, and after bishop g2, knight f6, I believe there's a few games in the database in this position played by weak masters. Is that an oxymoron? Am I allowed to say that? Masters that are around 2300. So after knight f3, the engine likes knight takes f3, and I believe one of the games actually went bishop takes f3, although the engine prefers taking with the pawn, and well, after d5, castles. But I played knight g6 instead, and well, castles, bishop g5, bishop g5, d6, which I knew was risky because, well, now the bishop cannot go to e7 to unpin the knight. Here my opponent played knight bd2, which I thought was an inaccuracy. I thought better was knight c3 with the threat of knight a4, as well as ideas of either knight d5 or knight e4 attacking the pinned knight. So just to show what I'm talking about, if takes, well, after bishop h6, you have the pawn structure is just shattered, and obviously the king cannot castle through check, so this is just better for white. But after knight bd2, well, I played h6, and now my opponent recaptured, and here, well, I'm attacking the pawn, so my opponent played c3, and here I should have played bishop f5. Instead I played castles, and well, now my opponent goes knight e4, and after the queen moves, takes my dark square bishop. So I wasn't very happy about that. Here I played c6 just to make sure that I don't have to worry about the pawn on b7 getting attacked by the bishop on g2 at some point. So queen c2, bishop g4, and here this was, I think, an attempt by my opponent to set up a trap. Obviously I cannot take the pawn because, well, it gets trapped, and well, the two pawns are not enough compensation for the bishop. But being a blitz game and being higher rated than my opponent, I think that I could make something out of this if I start to push the pawns. And well, here I played rook e8 instead of rook d8 because, again, I don't want to trade pieces. And here my opponent immediately took advantage of the outpost because I pushed the pawn, which was controlling that square. And here I did consider bishop d5, but I don't like the continuation shown by the engine. Not that my opponent would have found those moves. But if we trade bishops, I still think that this position is better for white, because not only is the knight on f5 much better than my knight on g6, this rook is gonna come here, and well, white is gonna have complete control of the only open file. And even though my king is safer than white's king, there's really no way for me to take advantage of the weaknesses on the light squares or to attack the king. And well, white's plan is pretty straightforward, and it's not so clear how black continues. So I played bishop d7 instead. And well, here I have to take the knight, otherwise the knight is gonna come to d6 and gonna be a monster there. And this move I didn't like. I mean, it is threatening checkmate in one move, but I think it's a rather artificial move. Here my opponent blundered with bishop b1. I guess he didn't want to go back with the bishop because the knight would come to the d3 square. But this just loses the queen. After, well, I didn't see the move. g5. And, well, the engine likes giving up the queen by taking on f5. But obviously, a pawn and a rook are not enough compensation for the queen. And well, this move just loses to the knight fork. But I played king g7 instead. And here g5 is also winning the queen. But I played rook d8 instead. And here g5, well, it's still winning, but it's not as big as an advantage as it had been a few moves ago. So here queen takes with check, queen takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, and you have a rook and a bishop against the queen. And well, it's white to move, so I guess white could take the pawn. But apparently that loses. So yeah, this is a rather complicated endgame, and white has to be very careful. It's a lot easier to play with the queen than with the rook and the bishop. But again, I didn't see it, so I just took, and here my opponent probably saw that g5 is winning the queen, so here we capture with the queen. And well, the knight is pinned, so I played king h7 so that my knight could move, because well, f4 would have just won the knight, which is what my opponent played. And here I didn't see that I could actually play knight d3. The point is that after you the bishop takes, you have this intermezzo, and after queen e5 you take, and take with the rook, and you cannot take my rook because, well, after the pawn recaptures, the king is not close enough to stop the pawn from promoting. So you have to play something like rook e1. And here I went back to f7, and my opponent played this move, queen d7. And well, here I played rook e8, and I thought, well, I'm fine if we trade my c pawn for this pawn on e3. But here my opponent just blundered with this move, king f2. So I took with check, and well, this is pretty much over. I mean, I'm just taking everything with check. And here I finally gave the last check. The queen is defending the rook, and well, there's really nothing. Here my opponent just went back with the queen. The engine suggests queen f3 check, and then rook d2 with the threat of queen g2 mate, so white has to give up the queen. But I saw a simpler win, just trade queens and check, and you win the bishop. So I'm up a piece and 4 pawns. So yeah, this is just over. And well, here the game ended. I think my opponent I think he thought that he had pressed his clock and made an illegal move, but nevertheless, I mean, this is just, there is no hope for white at all. And sorry if my voice sounds a little raspy. I've been sick those last few days. But yeah, thanks for watching, and if you like the video, hit the like button and share and subscribe. And hopefully my next video my voice will be back to normal. And well, I will see you in the next video.